As you recall in an earlier training video, I wanted to get the total in sales for the month of January. So next to the label, I typed in a formula. If you want to see the formula, you can either come up here and look in the formula bar, or you can double click on the cell, pops open the formula, you can make changes. Let me hit the escape key. Then after I typed it in, I also wanted that same formula for the months of February, March, and April. And the shortcut was, instead of to type it in, to go ahead and copy and paste the formula over. Now when I copied and pasted it, did it keep the same cell references? No, because it would be the same number. And so Excel has what's called relative referencing when it comes to copying and pasting your formulas or functions. In other words, it updates relative to the new position that you pasted it in. And the new position that we pasted this formula in is not a new row, it's a new column. So it only updated to the new position for that column. So instead of referencing, column C, it's column D now. And then that would be column E, so that updated, great. And then that's column F, fabulous. Also works for the rows as well. So if I go ahead and type in a formula that adds up this range here for that employee, the total sales, and I go ahead and copy and paste it down below, relative to its new position, it's going to automatically update that. Instead of referencing row 7 here above it, it'll be row 8, and that makes our job a lot easier. Now in this video, I'm going to go over absolute references, meaning that when you copy and paste the formula, you may want it to stay put and not update. What does that mean, and how does that work? Well, for example, over here I've got the commission I want to be able to calculate for each employee. So I'd go ahead and type in a formula. And how does the formula work? Well, I want to take the total in sales for that employee here, so there's the sum of that range there, and multiply it by my commission rate to get the total commission for that employee. So let's go ahead and calculate that first and hit the equals key on the keyboard. And you can go ahead and type in the cell reference of H7 or just select it. And then we want to multiply it, so we want to tap the asterisk key on the keyboard. That's the multiplier. And then go ahead and enter in H3 or select it, and then hit enter, and you're good to go, right? Oh, I hope that's in thousands of dollars because $44 for commission. Ouch! In any case, you'd think right now that you can go ahead and copy and paste the formula, right? Well, that's what I would do. That's what I was taught. So if I hover over the bottom right-hand corner, that little green box, and get the black cross, as we went over in an earlier training video, the Autofill handle, when you click and drag it, will copy and paste. Okay, I'm not getting what I expected. Why? Let's go ahead and select it, look up here in the formula bar, and you can see the references is H8 and H4. Well, you know what? If I double click, it'll actually highlight those cells for me, so that's easier to spot. And you can see that instead of being in H3, it updated to H4 relative to the new position when I copied and pasted it from, well, that row down to the next row. And that's nice for the employee to get the total there for the next employee, but as far as multiplying it by the same commission rate, that's not working for me. So what I need to do is I need to hit the escape key, and well, let's see what the value is. Double click on that. Okay, it's multiplying a number by a cell that contains text. Okay, that's a value issue. Hit the escape key. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to go back to the original formula, double click, and we somehow need to update this to tell Excel that when I copy and paste, don't update H3 when I go from one row to the next. So how do you do it? In the formula, go ahead and click before the reference H3, where I want it to stay. Don't move. Stay, Fido, stay, like you'd tell your dog to stay. And you hit the F4 key on the keyboard, and it adds dollar signs. Those are absolutes or constants. So when I go ahead and I hit the Enter key, and I come back up here, I use the black Autofill handle, double click really fast, and it copies and pastes it. Hey, it works, right? Well, let's double check. Let me select that cell, double click. It stayed in cell H3, it didn't update it. It was constant, but relative to its new position for the employee, it went down a row. That's great, because that's what we want. We want to be able to go ahead and go down to the next one for the next employee for that row, but to always stay in H3. So again, you can just go ahead and hit the F4 key. It'll add dollar signs for you. You don't have to do it. You can go ahead and type in the dollar signs. But what I do is when I want it to stay, I remember that. Stay, Fido, stay. How many letters are in Fido? 4. F4. Huh? Well, that's how I remember it. F4, Fido, stay. Now, speaking of which, let me hit the escape key and go back to the original here up at the top and double click where we started, that is. I just want it to stay in row because I'm copying from one row to the next. So do I need the constant, the absolute reference for H? No, because I'm not copying from one column to the next. So technically, you can just go ahead and delete it and you'll be fine. Because when it comes to copying and pasting, clicking and dragging the black Autofill handle, it's telling it to stay in that row and not update. But if I copy and paste it to a new column, okay, well this cell reference here, let me double click, does not tell it to stay in this column when I go from one column to the next, either backwards or forwards. So that's what's going to be referred to as mixed references, a cell containing both an absolute and a relative reference. And we'll go over that a little bit more in depth in the next training video. We'll try to keep it simple here. And let's just go ahead and hit enter. And remember, these are linked. So in this formula, I'm multiplying the commission rate by the total. So if I update the commission rate, or I update any one of these numbers over here in sales for January, February, March for any one of the employees, it'll update the corresponding total. So if I go ahead and I type in 1 and I hit enter, the total drops for that employee as well as the commission. If I come up here and from 36,000 I guess, and I change it to 1%, hit enter, now they're down to 4,000 in commission. Well, that's horrible. Let's go ahead and undo that. Excel may take it, but these employees may not. If you haven't watched the previous training video on absolute references, well, this one of mixed references is going to be mixed for you, pun intended. What I mean is that by default you have relative references until you add absolutes. When you do that, you're going to have what's known as a mixed reference in your formulas. So I want to go over it a little bit more in detail here. First off, what you're looking at is I got my commission rates for the areas of north, south, east, and west. Then I have their sales for quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then I have their commission for quarter 1, which is going to be a simple formula like for the north to multiply the commission rate by their sales from quarter 1. And then also the commission rate for the south by their sales from quarter 1 in the same column here, commission for quarter 1. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and type in equals and then select commission rate, 12%, which is cell C9. And then go ahead and do the asterisk to multiply by their total sales in quarter 1. Hit enter and there we go. Now after I type it in, I'm not using any mixed references yet, but if I go ahead and copy and paste the formula, instead of typing in the formula for each new area here, and I click and drag it by using the Autofill handle, okay, zoinks, what do we got going on here? Well, as you recall in the previous training video, when you see some gobbledygook like this, that means when you double click on it to get a visual handle on it, that it's not staying in this reference D6 for the sales. Instead, relative to its new position, it's updating, going down a cell. So when I go copy and paste this down from row 9 to row 10, it also takes this from row 6 down to row 7 by 1 row. So that's not going to work for me. What I need to do then is I need to hit the escape key, come back up here. Oh, and the value, of course, that means that it's taking a cell that contains number, which is going to be, well, okay, COM-Q1, and multiply it by the commission rate over here. If you double click, you see COM-Q1, the commission rate there. Hit the escape key. Okay, back up here. Let's go ahead and double click on it. Now what I need to do is I need to tell it to stay in row 6. So as you recall in the previous training video, we've got our cell reference, which is D6, which includes the row 6. So you can go ahead and click in front of that reference and hit the F4 key. Now I don't need the $sign on column D because I'm not copying and pasting it from one column to the next. So if I hit the F4 key again, it toggles over to where the $sign's just in front of the 6, hit F4, in front of the D, hit F4 again, and it clears it. So instead of toggling through all that with the F4 key several times, I can just come up here and type in the $sign before 6. So when I copy and paste the formula, it'll always stay in row 6. Unless, of course, I'm copying and pasting it into a new column, in which case it's going to update the column because I don't have an absolute reference in front of the column D letter there to keep it from moving over relative to the new column. So I'm just focusing on the row here. If I go ahead and hit enter, then I select it, hover over the lower right hand corner, get the black cross, double click really fast, and hey, did it work? It looks like it. Let's go ahead and double click to get a visual here. So it selects my cells in the formula, which includes the sales for quarter 1, the commission rate for south, which is in the south row. Hey, that worked out well. Fabulous. Let me hit enter. Now, let's go ahead and change things up a bit. Let's go ahead and actually copy and paste this formula here and do it over for the commissions that we're trying to calculate for north for quarter 2, 3, and 4. So if I copy and paste it, click and drag the black cross over to the right, what's going to happen? Oh, what the fudge? What are these pound symbols? Well, what Excel's trying to tell you is that if it can't show you the entire number because it's so big it doesn't fit within the column here, it's not going to show you any of it. Think of it this way. If it only showed me the number 3 here, would you really like that commission for $3 instead of $300,000? So it doesn't show you anything. You can hover over the cell here and it gives you the number. So that way it can pop up, you can see the entire thing instead of like maybe just the first 2 numbers or the first 3 or the first 6. I mean, you want those extra zeros, right, when you're getting paid? I do. In any case, let's go ahead and double click to see what's going on. And so I got the what? I don't have the commission rate. So when I copy and paste it from column D over into column E, it changed it from column C to column D. So it's taking what it thinks is the commission rate. Well, it doesn't think, it's just doing a relative reference. So the commission rate, instead of 12%, is 300,000 times 2,550,000. That's going to bankrupt the company. We can't have that. We got to go ahead and tell it to stay in column C. So when I copy and paste it over to the next column, it stays absolute as a constant. So let me hit the escape key and come back and double click, and then go ahead and update the reference to the commission column C. And like I said, you can hit the F4 key and toggle through it, so you just get the $ on the letter C for column C, or you can include it for row 9. I mean, but we're not going down or up by row, we're just copying it over column by column. So let's just go ahead and add the $ to C. Hit enter. Okay, select it. Go ahead and hover over the bottom right hand corner, get the black cross, the autofill, click and drag it over to the right. Okay, those numbers aren't as great as what we saw before. We're a little bit disappointed, but we have accurate numbers now. And then of course we can go ahead and how about if we select this range, hover over the bottom right hand corner of the selected range to get the black cross, click and drag it down. And did it update correctly? Let's go ahead and check it out. Double click to get a visual. And we got, okay, we're in the same column, sales for quarter 3, to figure out the commission rate. So we got the sales multiplied in the same row over here in the commission rate column, 10%, it figs. Cool. As you recall in an earlier training video, I briefly introduced you to the autofill feature, which by definition is a quick way to copy the contents of a cell or a range of cells to adjacent cells. And in this example, I want to copy the contents of cell H5, which using the autofill feature will only copy it to adjacent cells, so either to the right, to the left, above, or below the selected cell. Once you have the cell selected, to use the feature, in the bottom right hand corner of the cell, you get this green box. That's known as the Autofill Handle. You want to hover over it until you can see a black cross. When you're off of it, you get a white cross. If you go too far and you're on the border, you get a black 4-way arrow. So if you click and drag it with a black 4-way arrow, it'll drag the contents of the selected cell to, well, wherever you want to drag it to, moving it. The white cross just selects a range of cells, but the autofill feature is the black cross. Go ahead and click and drag it, and we'll just go over one column. And before I let go of the mouse, you see in the pop-up, that tells me what's going to be copied over into that cell after I let go of the mouse, which is total. Totally. Let's go ahead and select it, hit the delete key, and try it again, only this time, let's go backwards. Ooh, that sounds kind of kooky. Let's go ahead and select the cell. Hover over the autofill handle, get the black cross, click and drag and go backwards, let go, and awesome. Now let's go ahead and do it for a selected range of cells. So that selected range, bottom right hand corner, the green box, the autofill handle, hover over it, get the black cross, click and drag it and go down, and oh, you're just going crazy. Let's go ahead and hit undo a couple of times to get back to where we started. And let's move on to what we covered in an earlier training video, because in its simplicity you can copy and paste simple text or numbers, right? But in the earlier training video we did formulas, as you can see up here. In fact, let me go ahead and delete this range so we can go over it really quick. That instead of typing in that formula, which you can see references, well, let me double click, the contents above for January sales, let me hit the escape key. Instead of typing in the same formula to get February, I copied the formula and pasted it over here. Or you can use the black autofill handle. Well, when you hover over it, you get the black cross, click and drag it over to the right, and it copies over the formula. Now it copies the formula, not the exact same cell referencing, because if it did, we'd get January's numbers here, and we don't because you can see it's in column D. Excel has what's called relative referencing, so when you copy and paste a formula, or use the autofill handle, which is copying and pasting, it updates it relative to the new position that it finds itself in. And what's new here? Column, not row, but columns. So it took the formula over here, where I'm adding up a bunch of cells, and updated it from C's to D's. And then it updated it here to E's, and then, of course, the last column F's. And it also works row by row, so if I typed in a formula here that added up the contents of this range, and I copied and pasted that, it would update it relative to the new position it found itself in, not in a different column, but a different row. So it would update the numbers and say, okay, we're in a new row, row 8. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to use the roll mouse to roll down. Of course, you can use the down arrow underneath the scroll bar to go down one row at a time. And down below here, I'm looking at the label here, and I want to make it a little bit more fancy. So I'm going to come up here on the Home tab to the font group to demonstrate this next step when it comes to autofill. And I'm going to apply some formatting, like B for bold, I for italics, and the color red, or choose a different color. I'll go with red. So after you select it, and you're like, hey, I'd like to go ahead and copy and paste that. Well, when you hover over the bottom right-hand corner, you get the black cross, click and drag down, it copies and pastes it, right? But you get the autofill options. What's that about? When you hover over it, you can see that it solidifies, click on it, pops open a menu, and you get some options. By default, it wants to copy the contents of the cell. You can say, no, I just want to fill in the formatting only. Go ahead and select that. It disappears, at least the contents, but the formatting has been applied. So if I type in something else, oh, there you go. It's got the formatting. That's cool. Now if I want to go ahead and undo that, when I'm in edit mode, when I hit undo, it clears it, but I can't undo it completely because the cursor's flashing in the cell. You can see that I don't get the undo option. I have to hit the escape key to get it out of edit mode, and then I can go ahead and hit undo again. So I don't have that formatting applied down below. Let's go ahead and do it again. Click and drag and click on the autofill options to, this time, fill it without formatting. So it clears out the formatting, but it fills in the contents of the cell that I autofilled from. Cool. Then last but not least was the FlashFill. Now FlashFill is a lot like autofill, but a little bit more nitty-gritty when looking for patterns. We'll cover that in a later training video. We'll keep it simple here. Let me go ahead and click off and hit undo. And let me go ahead and throw in a shortcut key. So if you want to duplicate the contents of the cell above, instead of clicking and dragging using the Autofill handle or copying and pasting, just go ahead and select in the cell below it and use the shortcut keys Control-D. And it duplicates whatever is in the cell up above. Now if you did it for formulas, this is going to get a little bit strange, and I'll show you. So if I go ahead and Control-D, okay, what's happening here, let me double click to show you graphically, that because it's in a new row, it's doing that relative referencing. So it's not capturing the entire cells for January, but you can hover over the border of it, get a four-way arrow, click and drag and go, no. You can't go down one row, you got to stay put. And that brings up a good point that if you want to go ahead and use the autofill handle and you're getting this relative referencing relative to the new position that you're in, you're like, no, I don't want it to update row by row or column by column. Then I recommend that you watch my training videos on absolute and mixed references. So let me go ahead and hit the escape key. When I hit the escape key, it doesn't accept the change, it just pulls me back out. So it's still referencing cell 8 down to cell 11. Let me just go ahead and hit undo. Of course, I could have hit the delete key, that works as well, and hit undo again to get rid of that extra label there. Okay, and another shortcut real quick. When you use the autofill handle, if you're doing it in a column, like let me go ahead and select that range, hit the delete key, and I want to go ahead and copy that formula down. If you're doing it in a column, when you hover over the bottom right hand corner, get the black cross, you double click really fast, it'll automatically fill it in. Now when I click and drag and select what's up above, and I go, okay, now go backwards, go up, double click, it doesn't work that way. And it also doesn't work from left to right, just top to bottom in the column. Now another cool feature about the autofill handle is that it looks for patterns to help you, well, in this example, maybe I want to extend it beyond April, go to May, June, July. So instead of typing it in, I can go ahead and select the range enough to give it a pattern for Excel to go, okay, what comes after April? Let's see if it can figure it out. Select the range, hover over the bottom right hand corner of the selected range until you get the black cross, and click and drag, and you can see there it goes in the pop-up May, June, July. Oh, that's cool. I'll go ahead and undo that. Okay, how about something pretty simplistic, like, let me scroll down just a bit. I type in 1, hit enter. If I copy and paste that, it'll do 1, 1, 1 using the autofill handle. But if I do 2, what's next? I'll go ahead and select 1 and 2 so it's got a pattern that it can be based upon, something that's logical for Excel to figure out. And then click and drag the autofill handle down, and oh, looky there. Let me go down to 10. Fun. Okay, let's kind of change it up a bit. Let's do something a little bit more tricksy. 1, enter 3. Okay, what would be the pattern that I'm trying to establish there? By 2, so 2 plus 1 is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5. Let's go ahead and select it, click and drag, and see if I'm going to, oh, there we go, we got the numbers, cool. How about something like maybe quarter? Like quarter 1, let's just do Q1, and hit enter, and let's see if it can figure it out just with Q1. Let's not give it a pattern. I want to see how much Excel knows. Hover over the bottom right hand corner, click and drag. There's Q2, 3, 4. What if I continue beyond it? Oh, cool. It doesn't go to quarter 5 because, I mean, there's no such thing. There's only 4 quarters in a dollar. No, I'm kidding. 4 quarters in a year. And so you can see it just after it hits 4, it goes back to 1. The FlashFill is part of the Autofill feature, and if you don't know anything about Autofill, then I recommend that you watch my training video on it. In any case, to use FlashFill, you need to be next to a column of data that you want to change, or you could be several columns away, as long as it's within the same database range. And I got 3 database ranges here, and what makes them a database range that FlashFill can recognize or excel with the feature FlashFill? You can watch my training video on the top mistakes that are made when it comes to creating database ranges, but long story short, you see how it's organized in my first database range? I don't have extra blank columns in between like middle name and first name or rows, or I don't have my data scattered throughout the entire spreadsheet. It's tight and concise, and because of that, Excel will be able to see a pattern. So when I use the FlashFill feature, which by the way, by default should be turned on, and if not, I'll show you how to turn it on or turn it off. Well, let's come over here in this first example and click in the name cell, and I want to be able to extract last name, comma, space first. So to use the FlashFill feature, let's just start typing because we've got to type in a couple of names here to establish a pattern, and then once FlashFill picks up on it, it'll give us a list to be able to accept it or reject it. So for example, let me go ahead and type in Klinger, comma, space, first name, Max, hit enter. It doesn't kick in yet until I give it a second example, which is oh, there you go. Now is that right? Appleman Obe? No, it should be Appleman Bob. And then Simpson, it's got J in there, the middle name, and then Omer, deleted the first letter and the last name. So that's not right. So what we need to do is we need to push through this and continue on typing to say, no, this is the pattern I would like to see, because it's not seeing it yet. So Appleman, comma, space B-O-B, hit enter. Let's go ahead and establish a third example for FlashFill, which is Simpson. Oh, there you go. Let's see if this works. Let's see, last name Burns, and then Frank, and then last name Hume, and then Britt, no middle initials, even with the space for Wiggums Clancy. Doesn't mess that up. Fabulous. All you have to do to go ahead and accept the list here is to hit enter, and it fills it in a flash. Cool. And then you get the FlashFill options, so you can click on it to see what's available. You can undo it if you don't like it. You can accept the suggestions, which is fine. It's just like me clicking off of it. Or you can select all 8 changed cells. Select it, and there's the selection. Now, like I said, if it doesn't work for you, doesn't turn on, or it's on, you want it turned off, then come with me, good neighbor. Let's go backstage, click on the File tab, and I'll roll down to Options, go to the Advanced category, and it's right there, Automatic Flash Fill. Either check it or uncheck it. And let me go ahead and click Cancel so it's on. And let's come over to the next example. So this one, I want to be able to pull out the first name, and then over here the last name. So let's just go ahead and type in Max, hit enter, type in Bob. Oh, there you go. Does it look good? Of course it does. What if I hit the backspace keys and I'm like, oh, I missed it. Should I continue? You could try to play with it to bring it back up and then go, oh, okay, let me go back up and delete Bob and type it in again, Bob. Okay, it's not coming up. Well, to get by that, let's go ahead and type in Bob and hit enter. And then below that last example, you can go ahead and hold down the control key and hit the letter E, and it fills it in. In other words, those are the shortcut keys, rather than coming up here, clicking on the Data tab, going to the Data Tools group, and clicking on the command right there. And you can see in the pop-up, that's the FlashFill. The shortcut keys are Control E, and you can read the synopsis about it. Automatically fills in values. Enter a couple of examples, as we just did, that you want as output. And if you don't like the output, then don't accept it. Just keep entering in more examples, and hopefully it's nothing too complicated for Excel. Go ahead and push the envelope. And let's come over here and do last name, Klinger. And you can see I'm not next to the column that I want. I'm a column away, but it can figure out the range here that it's organized, the database range. And let's do Klinger, and then app. Oh, there we go. Hit enter, and it figured it out, and we got what we wanted. Now let me go ahead and click and drag the scroll bar down here to the last example and roll down on my mouse here. And for the phone number, I want to put a mask in. In other words, I want to be able to put parentheses around the area code, then have a space, then the 3-digit, then a dash, and the 4-digit. So to go ahead and fill that in, or have FlashFill do it for me, let's do open parentheses 515. Now, you want to be careful when you're doing something like this, because if I mistype in a number and I hit enter, FlashFill is going to look over here and go, I don't get it. Maybe it's a new pattern. It's going to look for several more examples, especially if you keep mistyping in the numbers and you're like, FlashFill doesn't work. Well, make sure that you have accurate data here, so I got to make sure I do it right. And this is going to be 548-4478. Okay, there's the first one. The next one's going to be open parentheses. Oh, looky there. Does it look good? 220-254-65. Okay, everything looks grizzly. Go ahead and hit enter. Fabulous. And then finally, as you saw in an earlier training video when we used the autofill feature, let me go ahead and delete this part and go ahead and select that part, and you hover over the bottom right hand corner of that green square to get the black cross, which is the autofill feature that when you click and drag it down and you let go, okay, you see how it brought it in here, it copied it. But remember, when you click on the autofill options, down below you get the flash fill. So hey, that's a quick way of doing it if it doesn't pop open, or you don't want to use the shortcut keys. You just want to go ahead and click and drag, select flash fill, and let's make sure it did it right, and it looks good. The text to column feature will break up phrases or groups of words in a cell into their own separate cells. So for example, we've got the full names here, and if I want to break them up, so last names are in one column of data, or their own separate cells for each name. And then the first name in this column, well, I can't put it in this column because it'll overwrite their social security numbers. So what I need to do is to come up here and right click on the column header, letter C, right click on it. In the shortcut menu, left click on insert, and it pushes it over. So that way it doesn't overwrite it. Of course, if you want to keep the full name and extract the last name and then the first name, okay, we'd have to insert another column so I don't overwrite that with their first name, but it's your flavor. I'm going to do it this way where I just have their last names here and the first names here. So to go ahead and start using the text to column feature, the first thing you need to do is to select the range of data that you want to break up. And I got their names here, so come up here, click on the Data tab, go to the Data Tools group, and it's right there, text to columns. Go ahead and click on it. Opens up a wizard. It's going to ask us a bunch of questions based upon our answers. Hopefully we get what we're looking for, the perfect extraction process. First of all, it says what file type best describes your data. Is the data within the selection separated by a character known as a delimiter, or is it going to be fixed? In other words, if it's fixed, you can select it, and you can say you just want the first 3 letters of everybody's last name to be in one column and then everything else in another column. So to set this fixed width, go ahead and click Next, and then down below on the horizontal ruler, go ahead and click on one of those tick marks, and it pops in a line that says, okay, it's going to be right here. So you can see the first 3 letters of the last name is going to be one column, and then everything else is going to be in another. And you can hover over that teeny tiny little thing and drag it around if you like, but I'm not going to do that. Let's hit back. It's going to be a character. And what's that character? It's a comma. Let's go ahead and click Next, and it says, okay, here's the delimiters. Which one is it? By default, it chooses the tab, but we're like, no, it's going to be a comma. Now down below, watch the data preview. When I come up here and I check comma, updates it, and oh, isn't that beautiful? Replace the comma with a line. Except we have a space to the right hand side of the comma or the line. Well, you see over here, it's to the right of the comma. Here, it updates it, shows it, it's also to the right of the line. So to get rid of the space, to say that's another delimiter that we don't want to include in the extraction, then go ahead and check space, and it collapses it. So when it extracts the first name, it's not going to have a space, then their first name. The name will be right up against the left side of the border of the cell. And you can leave tab checked. It's not going to hurt anything. It's up to you. Let's go ahead and click Next. And then it says, okay, what's the data format for this column or that column? If this one is something other than general, you want it to be text or a date, then go ahead and choose that. Or you don't have to import it all together. Just say don't import. And it says skip. So when you click Finish, the first name is obliterated. You just get the last name, but we're not going to do that. Let's go back to General. And before we go ahead and click Finish, notice the destination is cell B5. Okay, let's come over here. There's column B, row 5. So you see what's going to happen? It's going to take the last name and dump it into B5 and go all the way down, and then the next column just goes right next to it. C5 and dumps it right there. So it's going to overwrite this. If you do not want to overwrite that cell with the updates, then you can come over here, well, click in the destination, and you can choose over here. Then it'll go ahead and dump the last names and the first names. So it's going to overwrite social security number, and I don't want it to do that, so let's go back to B5. And you ready? Let's go ahead and click finish. Hey, that was fun. Okay, so we got the last name, so we may want to go ahead and update this and say it's last, and then first, hit enter. Fabulous. Now you're probably asking, couldn't I just go ahead and do the flash fill where, well, I'd have to hit undo a couple of times, right? And then just type in their first name of Max, if I want his first name here, and then Bob, and then go ahead and type in Danny. And if it's not doing flash fill, then just go ahead and do Control E to fill in the rest as a shortcut. Well, you can do flash fill, but it really depends upon the structure of your database. Because notice, once I go ahead and extract it, which is going to be faster, the flash fill, because then if I want to come back in here and delete all their first names, oh, that's a mess. So it depends. I'm going to go ahead and hit undo several times. And we're back to where we started. It's like this video never happened. I want to show you a few ways when it comes to editing the contents of a cell, the data they're in. Like for example, up in cell A1 camping gear US, you see how it bleeds over into cell B1? It's not in the cell, it's all in cell A1, but because there's nothing in cell B1, it's kind of like going to a movie theater where you stretch out because nobody else is sitting next to you. But the moment somebody comes in, like a number 1 guy, and you type in a number or whatever data you want, you hit enter, automatically you pull in your feet, it gets cut off, and the only way you can see the entire contents of the cell to either go ahead and stretch the width of the cell way over, or just go ahead and select it, look up here in the formula bar, and that's a little bit better because if I hover in between the 2 column headers till I can see arrows pointing in opposite directions and I click and drag, okay, temporarily that's nice, but I don't want to stretch open every single column because it needs that much space. So let me go ahead and hit undo. Of course, I could have clicked and dragged to collapse it and gone that way, but let me hit undo again to keep it about yay big. And then the moment somebody leaves, what do? You stretch out. And that's what's going on here, so you can see the entire contents. If you look in cell B1, you're like, oh, there's something there. Look up in the formula bar. There's nothing there. It's just a mirage. No, it's just stretching out, but when you go to cell A1, it's all packed in there. Again, because there's nothing else adjacent to it, and it needs that extra space to reveal the entire contents of the cell if it's not being used. Now, to edit the contents of the cell, you can either go ahead and double click on it to get the cursor flashing within it, and then you can go ahead and use, your arrows left, right, and then select maybe a word and update it. And then when you're done, you can either hit enter on the keyboard. When you hit enter, it returns down to the next row, as opposed to, let me double click again, and we don't like that, so let's go ahead and update it with .us. Instead of leaving the cell, you can come up here and click on the enter. It stays within that same cell, but it accepts the changes that we made. And also, if I double click and I decide to go to, instead of camping gear, how about sleeping gear? I'm like, oh, I made a mistake. Well, just go ahead and hit the escape key so it doesn't accept the changes, or you can come up here and click on cancel. And it reverts back to what we had before. And besides double clicking to get inside the contents of the cell, if you want to come up here and click in the formula bar, the moment you do that, the cell goes into edit mode, and you can see it that it flushes over. In any case, you can come in here and double click to select an entire word. There's a shortcut if you want to go ahead and select an entire word, so you can quickly hit the delete key, and I'm like, whoops, then hit the escape key. It pulls you back out, and it doesn't accept the changes or the deletion. And speaking of deleting, well, with the cell highlighted, I could hit the delete key on the keyboard, it gets rid of it, right? Let me hit undo, or you can select a range of cells and go ahead and hit delete, and I'm not going to do that. Let me hit undo. And instead of just deleting, there may be times where you just want to clear like the format of a cell. So for example, with, let's see, we got bold applied to Camping Gear US. You can come up here on the Home tab, come over here to the Editing group, and there's the eraser. You can go ahead and click on it, and you can clear everything out, like hitting the delete key, or you can say clear the formats. So when you clear the formats, it'll clear the bold. It's the only format that's being applied to it. Oh, and it's no longer in bold. Oh, how very ordinary. Let's go ahead and hit undo. And you get other options here as well to clear the comments and clear hyperlinks. I'm going to go ahead and click off. And next, if you want to insert a symbol like a trademark, copyright, like let's do it for camping gear, let's come up here and click after camping gear. And then to insert the symbol, now remember it's in edit mode, so I can do it in the formula bar, the cursor's flashing, or I can double click down here in the cell. Doesn't matter. Either way, it's in edit mode. You just have to choose whatever your flavor is, and then come up here, click on the Insert tab, go all the way over here to Symbols. Let me click on it to open it up, and there you go. Click on it. And down below it has the recently used symbols, and if you don't find it there, then you can go ahead and choose font type and select it and scroll through to find, well, any symbols. But if you're really looking for something that has more than what you see here, then click on the drop down arrow for the font and go all the way down to, oh, now I have to scroll back up, W's for Wingdings. That's kind of a funky name, Wingding. Go ahead and select it, and there's all different types of symbols. You have the candle, scissors, and you can scroll through all that. And they have Wingdings 1, 2, and 3. So go ahead and choose one, and then find one. And once you find one, like if it's a trademark here, select it, go ahead and click on Insert, and hey, there it is right there, Insert. Fabulous. And you can insert as many symbols as you like. And we'll insert another one, and then go ahead and click Close. And looky there. The number 8 doesn't show up in the formula bar, but it does show up down here. So if I hit enter, and I'm like, oh, that's horrifying. I made a mistake. Well, go ahead and select it, double click on it, or just come up here with it selected and hit, I'm flying blind, hit the backspace key. When you hit the backspace key, it deletes everything behind the cursor. When you hit the delete key, it deletes everything to the right of the cursor or in front of the cursor. So let me go ahead and, well, let's just get rid of the trademark altogether and hit enter, and we're back to where we started. And one last thing I want to show you when it comes to editing your data, like if you have a range of cells and you got it selected here and you want to be able to have somebody read it to you, those numbers, let's say that these are empty, we clear them out. Well, if you want to keep it structured, so when you're entering the data, it goes from, in this case, one column to the next. So after you type in, you know, your numbers here, and you hit enter, enter, and then you want to go up to the next column, you don't have to use your mouse. Well, that's pretty tricksy, isn't it? Well, let's go ahead and select a range again. And when I select it, you notice that of all the cells, you have one that's clear, that's blank. That's known as the active cell. So if I hit the enter key, it still keeps the selection there, but another cell becomes active. It's going down row by row. So hit enter, enter, and when I'm done, it goes to the next column in the first row for that column, or the range that we have selected, that first row there. And then if you made a mistake and you need to go backwards, well, instead of hitting enter, you can hold down the shift key and hit enter, and it starts going back. Oh, that's fun. Now, instead of going from row by row, you want to go column by column, then use the tab key. Tab's over. You want to go back to the previous column, hold down the shift key, then hit tab. There you go. And if you really want to dance around, hold down the control key and hit the period on the keyboard, and it will go all the way to the end of the range there, the right-hand side. And then hit control period again, goes to the bottom, control period again, goes all the way to the left, and then it goes all the way to the top. So you hit the 4 corners. So those are the shortcut keys. And when it comes to entering in data, I think for me it's a lot easier when I can go ahead and have somebody read me the numbers. When I get down to the bottom, they can go February. I don't have to lift my hands off the keyboard to be able to select the cell D7. I can just go ahead and keep on typing, saying, yeah, I got it, keep going, we're good. And then, of course, when you're done, you can move the mouse and click off somewhere, or better yet, just use one of the arrow keys on the keyboard, and it'll deselect everything. When I talk about editing cells, columns, and rows, in this video, I want to show you how you can insert, shift, and delete cells, columns, and rows. First of all, let's go over columns. If I want to be able to insert a new column here because I have some text or data that I want to enter in here, but I don't want to overwrite and delete what's already there, I just want to push it over. So when I push it over, I'd also like column B to push over to C and so on. Then just go ahead and right-click on the column header, letter A. When you right-click on it, go down the shortcut menu to insert, and it pushes A over to B and B over to C and so on. You can also do multiple insertions at the same time by selecting multiple columns. Let's do A, click and drag from A over to C, and then right-click on any one of those highlighted column headers and go down to Insert, and when I insert, it'll insert as many as I have highlighted. Click on it, and we got 3 plus 1. Okay. By the same token, to go ahead and get rid of those 3 columns, You can right click on any one of those highlighted column headers. When you right click, go down to delete, and then we're just down to one. You could do it that way, or instead of right clicking and being able to select the entire column to delete it, if you're anywhere within the column, you can come up here on the Home tab, go over to the Cells group, and you've got Delete there as well. Click on it. You can delete cells, which we'll go over in just a minute. You can delete rows, which we'll go over in just a minute. You can delete columns, which we'll do right now, but before that, you can also delete the sheet, which we'll cover in a later training video. So delete the column that I have a cell highlighted therein, click on it, and we're back to where we started. So you can come up here and insert, as well as, let me click off, delete your columns and rows, cells and sheets. So speaking of rows, we can come over here and click and drag to select a couple of rows, to right click that selection to insert a couple of new blank rows, and you can also right click and delete as well. And then what about if you want to be able to switch your rows and columns around? So for example, let's say I got the numbers and the months mixed up. Like this says March and that says April, and I need to flip them. I don't want to delete that one and then retype it here. Well, to go ahead and switch a row, just right click on column F, the header there that is, and go down to cut. You get the marching ants. It's in active mode. It's on the cutting board, the clipboard. And go ahead and right click on the column that you want to insert what you have cut, and it's going to be column E. So when I right click on it, it's not going to delete that, it's going to insert it, and what it does when it inserts it, it places it in between and just shifts everything over. So what's in here, oh, there we go. Let me go ahead and click on Insert Cut Cells, and you can see it just swaps. So now April's there, but we were pretending that we got it wrong and that was March, and so now it's updated. In any case, that's how you can go ahead and swap them around, is cut and insert those cuts. You can also do it for your rows. Select the rows, right click on the selection, and then go ahead and cut, and then right click somewhere else to insert the cut rows. Let me go ahead and click off, and let me undo that because that just doesn't look right. And I got the marching ants, it's in cut mode. When I go ahead and hit the escape key to get that cleared, and then click off. And then finally, about cells. Well, let's say that instead of inserting an entire column here and shifting H over to I, if I just want to shift over a particular range to a new column and not the entire column over, so the 8% stays in column H, you can go ahead and select the cells that in this example are before the total, that when I right click on that selection and I insert, I get a pop-up that says, let me click and drag the title bar over here, that says you can shift the cells to the right. So it'll take this and shift it over to the right, and what's in this range here over to the right of what's highlighted will shift over to I and then I to J and so on. So that way, if you just want to do a little update that doesn't include an entirely new column, but just a range of cells within that column, that when you shift it over, well, everything to the right of that and those adjacent columns will get shifted over as well. Or you can go ahead and shift them down. So if you have data below here that you want to push down without actually inserting entirely new rows, so that way it doesn't interrupt the data over to the left-hand side here, then go ahead and shift them down. Of course, you can also insert entirely new rows and new columns here, and that's another way of doing it. There's more than one way to do these things, so let's just go ahead and shift it over to the right, click okie dokie, and it gets pushed over. And so now 8% is still in H, but everything that was to the right of what I had selected here when I inserted got shifted over, and vice versa. If I want to be able to say, ooh, I got to close up that gap, that looks horrifying, and I don't want to delete the empty column G, because then commission 8% would be, looks like right smack next to it, and I don't want to do that. I want an extra space. So I just want to update a portion of the column here to be able to bring the data over. Then go ahead and select your range. Oh, let me make sure I select it correctly, so I include the label as well. That row all the way down here. Go ahead and right click, go to delete, and you can see where it says instead of inserting to the right or down, now when it comes to deleting, it's going to pull in to the left and up. You see the pattern there? So when it comes to inserting, it shifts over and down. Deleting will shift it or bring it up and to the left. You choose which way you want to go. So if I go up, it pulls everything down below up, but I want to pull everything over here to the left. So I'll click OK, and we're back to where we started. To help you find and or replace data on your worksheet or within your workbook, you can use the Find and Replace feature. which is found up here on the Home tab, over in the Editing group, and there's the magnifying glass. Go ahead and click on it to find the find, and there it is. You can see when I hover over it, it gives you the shortcut keys Control F. That is if you don't want to come up here on the ribbon to click on the command to open up the find window. But since I'm here, let me go ahead and click on it to open it up. And it opens up the find and replace. There's the replace. We'll click on that a little bit later on, but right now let's focus on the find. And to move the window, I'm going to go ahead and click and drag the title bar and put it up there. And then let's see, what do I want to find? I want to find the numbers, let's do 475. Well, I know it's right there, but you can imagine if you can't quickly eyeball it and you want to search the entire worksheet here, well, come up here, type in the numbers, 475, and then before I go ahead and click on Find Next, notice that that button is active or highlighted. Well, it means it's active. That means you can use the Enter key to go ahead instead of using the mouse to Find Next. Now, I'm not afraid to say it. I'm a mouse man. I like using a mouse. But if you're a keyboard person, great. And if it's not the button that you want highlighted or that's not active, so you can hit the Enter key on the keyboard, then you can hit the Tab key and toggle through and highlight those other, well, there's options. Hit the Tab key again, there's Find All. Or after you hit Tab and you want to go back, hold down the Shift key and hit Tab and it goes backwards. So Tab to the right, Shift Tab to the left. In any case, that's the first thing I want to make mention of. The second thing is that, what cell do I have highlighted on the worksheet? You can see up in the name box it's cell G9. That means when I click on Find Next or hit the Enter key on the keyboard, it's going to begin the search from that point forward. And by default, it's going to search row by row. You can change it to column by column, but I'll go over that in just a minute. But row by row means that it starts from that point and it finishes that row off all the way down to column XFD something. In any case, when it gets to the end, it quickly returns to the next row and goes from left to right all the way down to the bottom of the worksheet. And it does it so fast. So it's not going to initially find the 475s up here. It'll start from this point, go down, and find them down here. When it gets to the end of what it finds down below, then it'll return back up to the top and continue its search to find your 475s. So when I go ahead and hit Enter on that active button, jumps right to the first 475, well, from that point, the starting point of G9. And if I want to be able to start from the beginning, well, then go to the beginning, click in cell A1, and then, well, hit Enter or click on Find Next, and there you go, the first 475 in its search, starting from cell A1. Now, instead of hitting Enter, 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 or clicking Find Next, 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 if you want to be able to get the total number of cells that contain the numbers 475, go ahead and click on Find All. Or, if you want to go to Find All using the keyboard, just hold down the Shift key, hit Tab to go backwards, and there we go, Find All, then hit Enter, or click on it, pops open the window down below, and this is everything it found, a total of 7 cells that contains the value of 475. Now you can click and drag the scroll bar, or what I like doing is hovering over the bottom border of the window until I can see arrows pointing up and down, and clicking and dragging to expand it so I don't get the scroll bar, if I can avoid the scrolly bar. And there you go. First of all, notice that it only searched in sheet 1. Well, how do you know it only did that? We'll go over that in just a minute, but by default, whatever sheet you're on, it's only going to search that worksheet. And so on sheet 1, in those cells, D6, D7, it found the corresponding values, all 475. And notice, when I hover over any one of these, I get the finger and it highlights, well, actually underlines it like a hyperlink, because it is hyper to take you there when you click on it, like, well, you don't have to click on E16 to jump right to it. Just anywhere on that hyperlink, it'll jump right to E16, and there you go, it's right there. Cool. And we can go back to D6, jumps right to it, and again, you can click anywhere on that line or that link. Next, let's go ahead and do a replace for the number 475 by coming up here in the same window, but clicking on the Replace tab. Just adds the extra field, replace with what. Let's do 450. And then it's going to begin in cell D6. So when I click on Replace, it'll update the number here as well as over here. So click on Replace, it updates it over here. Then it jumps to the next, Find What, 475, which it found in cell D7. It's right there, D7, click on Replace. Then the window, after I replace it, gets bumped over because, well, it has to go to E7. And since the window's in the way, it wants to move it out of the way so you can see what's highlighted there, what it found. Cool. And instead of clicking on Replace, 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 or hitting Enter, Enter, Enter on the active button there, you can go ahead and click on Replace All. One-stop replace. Just go ahead and click on it, and there's a total of 5 remaining replacements out of the total of 7, and I already replaced 2 of them. So let's go ahead and click OK. Cool. Now what about searching the entire workbook for finding and or replacing, not just sheet 1? Well, first of all, do I have anything on sheet 2? Or rather show you first. Let me go ahead and close out and click on sheet 2. Oh, that was a plant. Okay, we have one number 450 and nothing on sheet 3. Let me go back to sheet 1. So if I want to look for 450, not just on this worksheet, but include all the other worksheets, let's do Control F to pop open the window. And then this time, well, first of all, we can type in 450 to replace 475, and then click on Options. Let me click and drag the title bar here. And we want to search within not just the active sheet that we're on, but the entire workbook. That's what's missing. Okay, and then go ahead and click on either Find Next or hit Find All. And then that way it opens it up. Click and drag the top, then go to the bottom, hover over it, click and drag to stretch it. And hey, there we go, sheet 2. All the others are sheet 1, and on sheet 2, we got 450. Okay, it's not as fancy, it doesn't have the 2 extra decimal places, but we'll fix that. Or I'll show you how you can add the extra decimal places or remove them in a later training video. So to go ahead and go right to it, you got the finger, click on it, takes you right to it, and then to go back to sheet 1, well, any one of these cells will do it. Let's go to D6, and we're back. And of course, you can see down below, it found a total of 8 cells. Well, 7 on sheet 1 and 1 on sheet 2. Now, in addition to finding data, what if you have data that you want to find that has certain formatting applied to it, like maybe all the 450s that are highlighted or in bold because you don't want to find all of them, just the ones that have special emphasis or formatting? Then to set the criteria for formatting, just come up here and click on the Format drop-down arrow and select Format. Oh, there's a lot of formats. This is where it gets pretty funky. You've got like numbers, currency, accounting, date, time, alignments, font. Let's stick with font. We'll keep it simple. But boy, you can do a lot of different types of formats you can search for. But in this example, let's say that we just want to search for those cells with 450 that are bold. And then click OK. And then you can see here a preview of it. It's in bold. And so when I click on Find Next, I get bagel, 0. Why? Because it doesn't meet both conditions. Oh, it meets the 450. It's right there. We can see it. But because it's not in bold, it says, forget it. I can't see it. So fine. What if I go ahead and delete it and say, okay, just find anything that's in bold and say Find All? It found the titles, Camping Gear US for that database, and then Camping Gear UK. Now, you can do it that way when it comes to formatting, or instead, if you got a lot of formats applied to a single cell, you got bold, underline, italics, a different type of font, and you want to find that same type of formatting all mixed into that one cell in another cell, then instead of clicking on the, well, you can click on the Format button, it opens up the Format window. You don't have to click on the drop-down arrow. Instead of going, okay, I know it was bold, I know the color was red, I know it was this, that, go ahead and click Cancel here, and instead click on the drop-down arrow and say that you want to choose the format from the cell. When you click on it, it collapses it, and you get a little ink dropper next to your white cross. So whatever cell you click on, it sucks it in the ink dropper, the sample of the formatting, and it pulls it in. I'm going to go ahead and hit the Escape key to get out of that, because I'm not going to pull it in. I mean, all it's got applied to it, as you can see, it's highlighted bold. Well, there could be more formatting, some of which I'm not aware of, but in any case, let's go ahead and Control F and bring this back up. And you want to keep this in mind, because if it's not obvious to you, I mean, that is preview, but maybe you forget and you're like, okay, quickly, I got to go find a number 450 and hit enter. And it's like, what the fudge? You can't find it. And you click OK and you're pulling your hair out. Well, the first place I would look is, if it doesn't display it in the preview window, I would come over here and click on the drop down arrow and click on Clear Find Format, because if that's active, that means formatting's been applied to it, and that's part of the conditions it has to meet in addition to the number 450. So clear it, and then go ahead and with 450 being the only condition that needs to be met, click Find Next, and we're back to Happyville. It found 450. Yay! The GoTo feature is just like it sounds. You can quickly go to a cell by using this feature, and it can be found up here on the Home tab over in the Editing group, the magnifying glass. There it is, GoTo. And you can see in the pop-up when I hover over it, you can use the shortcut keys Control-G. Let me go ahead and click on it. Opens up the window, or better yet, let me close out. You can hit the F5 key on the keyboard and that pops open. Oh, that's a lot faster. So what you can do for one aspect of this feature is you can type in the reference that you want to go to, like let's say cell Z2000, And before I click OK, take a look at what cell that I'm currently in. It's A3. So when I click OK, it takes me over to column Z, row 2000. When I hit the F5 key again, it remembers where I came from. Oh, that's a nice trail of breadcrumbs. So if I want to go back to it, you can go ahead and select it and click OK, or just double click on it. Takes you right back to cell A3. Okay, let me scroll up here so I can see A1 as well. Now, could I have simply have come up here in the name box and said, okay, let's just go to cell C3 and hit enter to go right to it? Well, yeah, but the thing that you're missing, at least one feature, is the trail of breadcrumbs. So if I go ahead and, hit F5 and I go back to A3 and then I hit F5 again, it remember where I came from, which was C3. So it's keeping all that tracked. Well, at least in this session until I close out. When I open up Excel again, it's going to be cleared. But the thing that'll always be there, if you have it, is your own proprietary name for those cells. So for example, what the heck is cell C3, cell A3? When I got a trail here, I'm like, I don't even know what cells, or I can't remember what those represented. Well, you can go ahead and give them your own names. So for example, cell F3, up here it says commission. So instead of saying up here in the name box F3, how about if I go ahead and give it a name in addition to it? When I say in addition, because when I go ahead and give it another name, Excel will still recognize that it's F3, but in addition to it, whatever name I want to give it. So to give it a new name, I'm going to come up here and type in I'm not going to type it out, commission. And if I want to add a space, because the name box doesn't like you adding spaces, I'm going to do shift underscore. And since I got two commissions here, one for the percentage and one for the actual dollar amount that they get, I could say, well, this could be commission 1. And then when I go ahead and hit enter, it accepts it. So now that has two names. It's got the original name of cell F3. So if I come over here and I say, okay, I want to go to F3, and I hit enter, it takes me right to it. It also shows me there that the name that I have for it is commission 1. And again, I'll go over this in greater detail in a later training video, but again, for the sake of this exercise, here when it comes to GoTo, when I click off somewhere, and well, you can click on the drop-down arrow and there's COM1, it'll take you right to it, but again, when I click off somewhere, and I hit the F5 key on the keyboard, guess what's there? Oh, isn't that so tinsel? And so I can go ahead and go, oh yeah, that's commission 1. I mean, F3, what the heck's that? I don't memorize these cell references here, but I do know what that is because I named it. Awesome. So I can go ahead and double click and it jumps right to it. And it will remember it. So if I go ahead and I want to make sure I save my updates here, and then I close out, and there's my GoTo right there, and double click to open it back up again, and there it is, the name box, and I click off somewhere, and I'm like, well, let's go ahead and go to F5. There's COM1. It'll always be there. So I can always go back to it, even though I haven't jumped around. And then I double click to open it up, and I go ahead and hit the F5 key on the keyboard. I haven't moved anywhere, have I? But it's got the name there, so part of the GoTo feature is that it'll have in those named references, the names that you gave it. So if you want to go ahead and jump up, jump down, jump around, if you got the names there, not only can you select it, but you'll know what you're going to. And then down below you got something special. Go ahead and click on that. And when it comes to GoTo, well, let's see, you can go to comments, you can go to constants, you can go to formulas, you can choose, well, let's go to formulas. And let's see, we can choose with numbers, text, logical, errors. I'm just going to stick to formulas and click OK. And looky there, it highlighted and selected all the cells that contain formulas. So if I want to do something like, okay, let me go ahead and update all those cells that have formulas with the new formatting. Let's do bold. Oh, that's fancy. And then, of course, if you're wondering, hey, do those really contain formulas? Well, you got the shortcut key, Control tilde, and it will pop open to reveal the cells that contain the formulas. And you can see all those that are highlighted here that contain formulas there and there. And so to collapse it again, because well, that's quite the scrolly I got going on, but I wanted to show you, yes, there are formulas in there. And from this point, you can go ahead and go file down to print if you want to print your formulas. But if you don't want to see them and you don't want to print them, Control tilde again, and it collapses back to the way we had it before. To transpose your data, that is to take a range of data and flip it, like if you have labels up at the top and you want it on the side like I have down below, or you have labels on the side and you want them at the top for each column, then go ahead and select the range that you want to transpose or flip, and Control C to copy so we get the marching ants. Then go ahead and select a blank cell off somewhere so you don't accidentally paste over any other data. And then to paste it, you want to go ahead and come up here either on the Home tab in the Clipboard group and click on the Paste drop-down arrow, and you're looking for right there, Transpose. And you can see when I hover over it, it gives me a preview down. Oh, I can't move off of it because then it disappears. So you got to keep your eye there. Better yet, we can go ahead and right-click on that cell and also get the Paste options, which is the Transpose right here. You can see that it's transposing from the side to column or from the column to its side. In any case, you can see it gives you the preview, and if you likes it, go ahead and click on it and it flips it. Of course, you got that extra column gappage there. Well, we had it as a row gap, now it's a column, and it did it beautifully. And vice versa, go ahead and let's copy that selection and then come down here and let's go ahead and transpose it by right-clicking and choosing the Transpose Paste option, and beautiful. Now, it does very well with data and text, but when it comes to functions and formulas, not so much. So let me go ahead and, well, let's clear this out. I don't want to be scrolling all over the place. Hit the delete key, and then come back here. How about if I go ahead and do it for the labels, month total, month average, for, as you can see in that cell, these formulas here for the average and the total. So select the range. Let's go ahead and Control C to copy it. Let me right-click in that cell and do Transpose, left-click, and, well, that's horrifying. What happened? Well, to find out, well, you can see it up here to graphically represent it. Let's double-click to find out. Oh, you see how it did relative referencing? So what I have to do for the month total is to click and drag and say, that's that reference, that's that reference. See, it's not easy, is it? So I don't recommend it unless you absolutely have to do it. And then go ahead and hit enter. And for the month average, double click. Okay, you see, that's just a mess. So that's not my favorite when it comes to working with formulas, because then it's all over the place with relative referencing. Let me go ahead and hit the escape key and click and drag to select it and delete it. The other way to transpose data is to use the function transpose. And to do it that way, all you have to do is go ahead and select a range that's in proportion of what you want transposed. So if I want to go ahead and have this range transposed over here by using the transpose function, then I need to select, let's see, for the row labels, because these are column labels, but to be in row labels, it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4. And then for the columns, it would start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I come over here and I go down one cell or one row for each column, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, there we go. And then go over for each row, which we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, see, that clicking and dragging just gets out of control. It's just crazy. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and let me go back to 6. And then let go. And you got the active cell, which is highlighted. Just go ahead and start typing, and it'll enter the function equals TRA, and there we go, transpose with it highlighted. Hit the tab key to pop open the function, and then go ahead and let's scroll back and select the range that we want to transpose. And instead of hitting enter on the keyboard, that's not going to work. You have to hold down the control key, the shift key, and then hit enter, control shift enter, and then it transposes. Oh, that's beautiful, except I don't need the zeros, but they're there. In any case, it did bring it over and flipped it. So instead of column labels, I now have row labels. And you can see with everything selected, up there you've got the transpose. And when I go ahead and select anything within that range, it's all transposed. And if you want to be able to get rid of that, and you just want to go back to simple values, well, you can go ahead and select it, and it's going to overshoot maybe. Oh, there we go. And then go ahead and just Control C to copy it, and then right-click on the selection and just paste it as values, so it updates it. So now you don't get the transpose function up there for any cell that you select within that range, because what you did is you copied what was there, but you decided to not paste the function, but to paste the results of that function instead, which is the value, in which case would includes the labels for the cells we have here, the numbers, and it all looks good. And then hit the escape key to get rid of the marching ants. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for great specials on my products, please look in the description below this video.